Kenya did not just find gold. It opened a wound someone hoped would stay buried 1,000 meters below the earth. When the drill pierced Kakamega's red soil and the readings began to spike. The celebration lasted only seconds before the fear arrived. Because every African knows that discoveries like this are never just discoveries. They are tests. They are mirrors. They reveal who truly owns the land and who merely walks on it. $5 billion. 36,000 kilograms of gold. Enough to lift a generation, enough to rebuild a nation. And yet, the first voices we heard were not of triumph, but surrender. We do not have the capacity, a minister declared. A sentence that felt less like an assessment and more like a memory from an era Africa should have left behind. If you believe this story deserves to be told truthfully, remember to like, comment, and subscribe, because what unfolds next will challenge every assumption about sovereignty, development, and who gets to define Africa's future. This is not about gold. This is about power. The facts are now public. Kenya has confirmed a deposit of 1.27 million ounces of gold, over $5 billion, lying more than 1 kilometer beneath the Isolu and Bushiangala zones of Kakamega. The extraction has been handed to Shanta Gold, a British-listed company, after Cabinet Secretary Hassan Joho argued that Kenyans do not have the technology or capacity to mine at such depth. Small-scale miners are being relocated. An 8-year underground operation is being prepared. A processing plant and a 12-megawatt power station are already in the plans. But this announcement carried a shadow, because behind the numbers lies a familiar pattern Africa has seen too many times before. And Kenya now stands at the edge of that pattern once again. The real story of Kakamega does not begin with the gold. It begins with the silence that followed. A silence so deep that even the miners who first sensed the veins beneath the red soil felt something shift in the air. Because this discovery, unlike any other in Kenya's modern memory, did not arrive with the roar of celebration. It arrived with the weight of a familiar shadow. A shadow that has followed Africa for more than a century, one that reappears every time a new treasure is pulled from beneath our feet. The first signal was not the announcement of numbers. It was the framing. 1.27 million ounces. $5.29 billion. Gold lying a full kilometer beneath Isolu and Bushiangala. But instead of hearing a nation preparing to rise, we heard a minister explaining why Kenya must immediately hand the opportunity to someone else. Why a British company was the natural custodian of Kenya's deepest wealth. Why Kenyans were inadequate for the task. When Cabinet Secretary Hassan Joho declared, "We do not have the capacity," he was not speaking about machinery or geology. He was revealing an inherited worldview. A worldview planted across this continent through decades of repetition, coercion, and psychological engineering. A worldview that has convinced too many African leaders that development must always be outsourced. And that sovereignty must always be negotiated from a position of inferiority. That sentence, "We do not have the capacity," is not new. It has been spoken in different languages. By different elites, from Accra to Kinshasa to Dar es Salaam, every time foreign corporations arrive with contracts in hand. It is the sentence that transforms national wealth into foreign profit with the flick of a pen. Local miners, however, did not need a press conference to understand what was happening. These are men and women who have lived on this land for generations, who learned to read the soil long before any European geologist set foot in Kakamega. They scraped a living from shallow pits, found traces of gold with basic tools, and survived on the hope that one day the land would reward their persistence. Yet they were the first to be told to leave. Their pits were sealed. Their homes marked for relocation. They were informed that their knowledge, their experience, and their history held no place in the new Kakamega. Because in the modern African extraction model, local communities are always the first sacrifice. This pattern has repeated itself across the continent. A discovery is made. A foreign company expresses interest. Feasibility studies are prepared thousands of miles away. Licensing negotiations occur behind closed doors. Government officials praise investment. Contracts are signed. And suddenly, fences rise around land that used to belong to local families. Heavy machinery moves in. Jobs are promised, but only the most dangerous, lowest paid ones. The real value, control, refining, exportation, profits, flows outward. Kenya is now standing exactly at this familiar crossroads. Look closely at the architecture surrounding the Kakamega project, and the design becomes unmistakable. An underground mining plan extending 8 years. A company listed in London given operational control. A processing plant designed to refine the gold quickly and ship it out of the country. A 12-megawatt power station built primarily to serve the mine, not the surrounding communities. Kenya's role is to provide land, security, and a labor force. The foreign operator's role is to extract maximum value and export it abroad. Everything is optimized, except Kenya's benefit. And yet the narrative pushed to the public is that Kenya lacks the technical ability to manage its own discovery. But this is the same Kenya that builds geothermal power plants envied by the world. The same Kenya that runs one of Africa's most advanced mobile money ecosystems. The same Kenya that constructs highways, ports, and energy corridors. The same Kenya whose engineers work on major projects from the Middle East to Europe. How, then, is mining suddenly too advanced? How is gold, one of humanity's oldest commodities, beyond Kenya's reach? Because lack of capacity does not describe Kenya. It describes a political class that has not invested in Kenyan capacity. It describes a government that finds it easier to invite foreign operators than to nurture domestic expertise. It describes a system that rewards quick deals, foreign praise, and commissions, rather than long-term national development. And it is here, in the middle of this tension, that we must pause. If you believe Kenya deserves more than recycled dependency, leave your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters. Because narratives do not change on their own. They change when citizens demand something different. What is unfolding in Kakamega is not an anomaly. It is the modern face of extraction. It arrives through press conferences instead of soldiers. It uses contracts instead of chains. It hides behind terms like investment, partnership, and capacity building. But the outcome is the same as it was a century ago: the wealth leaves. And the poverty stays. Walk through communities near Bushiangala today, and you will feel the tension. Some residents speak with anger, others with resignation. Many simply watch as markings appear on land that their ancestors protected long before colonial borders were drawn. Their perspective is absent from policy debates, yet they are the ones who stand to lose the most. Their displacement will never be listed in corporate earnings reports. Their grief will never appear in shareholder meetings. But their sacrifice will fuel the profits of investors thousands of miles away. This is the mechanism Kenya is now entering, one polished by time, lobbyists, international finance institutions, and foreign governments. It is efficient. It is legal. It is profitable. It is also devastating. And unless Kenya chooses a different path, the gold of Kakamega will follow the same route African minerals have followed for generations: out. If Kenya wants to see what sovereignty looks like when a nation decides to reclaim control of its own wealth, it does not need to search through history books. It only needs to look west. Because in West Africa, two countries, Burkina Faso and Niger, have broken ranks with the old playbook, rejecting the notion that Africans are eternally incapable of managing their own resources. Their decisions shocked analysts, unsettled foreign corporations, and forced global powers to recalculate assumptions they once considered permanent. But more importantly, their actions carved a new path, one that Kenya now finds itself staring at. Whether it admits it or not. The transformation began in Burkina Faso. When Captain Ibrahim Traoré took power, he inherited a country with gold in the soil but leaks in every direction. Foreign companies extracted most of the wealth. Taxes were low, oversight was weak, and local miners lived in hardship despite sitting atop some of the purest gold veins in West Africa. Yet the international community insisted this system was efficient, stable, and good for investment. Good for whom was a question nobody answered. Traoré answered it in his own way. And he answered it decisively. His government launched a sweeping overhaul of the mining sector. Contracts that disadvantaged Burkina Faso were renegotiated. Companies refusing equitable terms were expelled or replaced. The state increased its stakes in key mines, moving from minority participation to majority control. A new directive required that more of the refining happen inside Burkina, not abroad. Local mining cooperatives received technical training and equipment. And for the first time, a significant portion of revenues reached public services, roads, clinics, water systems, and local development funds. Foreign commentators predicted economic collapse. They said investors would flee. They said Burkina Faso would regret challenging the global order. But something unexpected happened. Revenues increased. Leakage decreased. Production stabilized. And, perhaps most critically, Burkinabe citizens felt a renewed sense of ownership over their land. The narrative changed from, "we cannot," to, "we are doing it already." Yet Burkina Faso was not alone. In 2024, Niger made an even more forceful move. It nationalized its only industrial-scale gold mine, seizing it from a foreign operator after accusing the company of contractual violations. Analysts again warned of chaos. They said Niger would struggle to run the mine. They said the government lacked the technical capacity. They said the decision would deter investment for a generation. But Niger did not reverse course. Instead, it announced a new mining doctrine: strategic resources, gold, uranium, and other critical minerals, must be controlled by the state or majority-owned local entities. Foreign firms could participate, but not dominate. They could partner, but not dictate. They could profit, but not extract without accountability. Niger's decision struck at the core of a narrative that has shaped Africa for decades. For years, foreign companies insisted that without their technology and expertise, African states would be unable to operate mines. Yet the moment Niger assumed control, something remarkable became clear: the mine did not collapse. Workers did not disappear. Production did not stop. The machinery did not fall silent simply because it was now in African hands. The truth is simple: African nations have always had the capacity. They have simply lacked the political permission to use it. And this is where Kenya's dilemma grows sharper. Because while Burkina Faso and Niger rewrite the rules, Kenya risks repeating the oldest chapter in the book. One country reclaims a gold mine. Another demands majority control. Meanwhile, Kenya hands a $5.29 billion discovery to a foreign firm before the dust has even settled on the announcement. In Ouagadougou and Niamey, leaders speak openly about sovereignty. They speak about retaining value, building local capacity, and breaking the chains of dependency. They speak about future generations. But in Nairobi, the national conversation was dominated by a single sentence: "We do not have the capacity." A sentence that would never be spoken in Burkina Faso. A sentence unthinkable in today's Niger. These two nations, though facing significant challenges, have demonstrated something Kenya cannot ignore: foreign companies do not invest out of charity. They invest to extract value, maximize shareholder gain, and secure long-term control over supply chains. If a state does not assert itself, the market will not assert for it. If a government does not negotiate from strength, corporations will fill the vacuum. This reality is not ideological. It is economic. Burkina Faso and Niger discovered that every negotiation with a foreign mining firm contains two invisible forces: dependency and fear. Dependency, the belief that without foreign machinery, nothing can begin. Fear, the belief that without foreign investment, everything will collapse. These forces have shaped Africa's mining industry for decades. But when these countries broke free from that psychological grip, they discovered something liberating. The earth beneath their feet belongs to them, not to the companies lined up outside their ministries. And once they acted accordingly, the world adjusted. Kenya must absorb this lesson with urgency. Because the gold of Kakamega is not just a mineral deposit. It is a test of vision. A test of courage. A test of whether Kenya will follow the path of nations reclaiming their resources or the path of nations outsourcing their futures. The deposits in Isilu and Bushiangala could generate opportunities for Kenyan geologists. Technicians, metallurgists, surveyors, engineers, accountants, and entrepreneurs. They could fund public hospitals, renewable energy grids, school programs, and manufacturing zones. But they can only do these things if the wealth remains in Kenya. And that will not happen if Kenya accepts the logic that capacity must be imported every time value is discovered. Burkina Faso did not accept that logic. Niger did not accept that logic. And their examples now stand as a direct challenge to Kenya's current trajectory. The riches beneath Kakamega are not simply resources. They are a crossroads. And whether Kenya takes the road of sovereignty or the road of surrender will determine far more than the fate of a single mine. It will determine whether future generations inherit wealth or inherit excuses. Kenya now stands at a crossroads that will define not only its economy, but its identity. The gold beneath Kakamega is not merely a resource, it is a question. A test. A moment in which a country must decide who it believes itself to be. Throughout Africa's history, discoveries like this have revealed more about governments than about geology. Minerals expose character, because they force leaders to choose between sovereignty and dependency. Between courage and convenience, between the future of a nation and the comfort of a few. Kenya now faces that choice. On one side lies the path of sovereignty, the one Burkina Faso and Niger have already taken. A path where a nation declares that its wealth will remain under its control. Where contracts are renegotiated. Where refining happens at home. Where state ownership is not symbolic but decisive. It is a path that demands skill, discipline, and political will. But it leads somewhere meaningful: infrastructure, dignity, stability, national pride. On the other side lies the path Kenya has walked before, the outsourcing of control. A path where discoveries produce headlines but not hospitals. Where gold leaves the soil faster than development enters the villages. A path where a foreign corporation manages everything from extraction to export. While Kenya provides land, labor, and silence. A path where communities living next to billion-dollar wealth continue to live without clean water or stable electricity. And the danger today is that Kenya appears ready to step onto that second path again. The language surrounding Kakamega's discovery should alarm every Kenyan. Words like foreign expertise, foreign capacity, foreign management now dominate the narrative. As though Kenya, a nation that builds geothermal plants, ports, and digital finance systems, cannot operate a mine. As though extracting the gold beneath Kenyan soil must automatically benefit boardrooms in London before it benefits children in Western Kenya. This is not about capacity. It is about confidence. It is about political will. It is about who gets to define Kenya's future. Because the truth is simple, no country was ever built by believing it could not do the job. Imagine, for a moment, a different future. Imagine a Kenya where the state holds the majority stake in every major mineral project. Imagine refining plants, research labs, and training centers built not for foreign engineers but for Kenyan students. Imagine gold revenues funding universal healthcare, debt reduction, roads, and new industries. Imagine artisanal miners becoming members of regulated cooperatives instead of victims of eviction notices. Imagine the gold beneath Kakamega transforming Western Kenya into an industrial and educational hub. This is not impossible. Burkina Faso is doing it. Niger is doing it. Tanzania has done it. The idea that Kenya alone is incapable is one of the most damaging myths ever imposed on an African nation. And yet, the opposite future is equally real. Imagine billions leaving the country while communities near the mine remain poor. Imagine foreign refining plants benefiting from Kenyan gold while Kenya imports refined products at a higher cost. Imagine contracts written abroad shaping Kenya's economy for decades. Imagine future generations asking why their inheritance was handed away before they were even born. This future is not hypothetical. It is the story of much of Africa's past. And it is in this moment, right now, that your voice matters. If you believe Africa's wealth should serve African families, share your thoughts in the comments. Moments like this are shaped by those willing to speak. Because what Kenya decides today will echo for decades. It will shape investor expectations. It will shape regional politics. It will shape whether Kenya is seen as a country negotiating from power, or a country signing out of fear. Burkina Faso and Niger have proven that when a nation asserts itself, the world adapts. When a state demands fair value, companies renegotiate. When governments refuse to bow, the narrative changes. The myth that Africa must remain dependent collapses the moment an African state proves otherwise. Kenya can be that state. It can choose sovereignty over surrender. Strength over hesitation, dignity over dependency. The gold of Kakamega is not merely a mineral deposit. It is a turning point. A mirror. A measure of Kenya's belief in itself. And if Kenya chooses rightly, the next chapter will not be written in foreign boardrooms, but on Kenyan soil. Every nation believes the battle for its resources is fought in the open, through rallies, protests, political speeches, televised announcements. But Kenya's true battle over Kakamega's gold is unfolding somewhere far quieter, inside the clauses of a contract almost no citizen has read and even fewer understand. And it is here, buried not in the earth but in the paperwork, that the twist reveals itself. Because while Kenya debates capacity, foreign observers debate something entirely different: how much control Kenya unknowingly gave away before the first ounce of gold was ever extracted. Hidden inside many modern mining agreements, across Africa, Asia, and Latin America, is a mechanism so powerful it can override elections, paralyze reforms, and lock governments into decades of compliance. It is called a stabilization clause. And if one appears in Kenya's deal, the consequences will echo far longer than the lifespan of the mine. A stabilization clause freezes the economic terms of a contract for 10, 15, sometimes 20 years. It prevents a country from increasing taxes, changing royalty rates, adjusting ownership structures, or renegotiating profit sharing, even if the national interest demands it. Even if Parliament votes for it. Even if the people demand it. Even if the government changes. It is, in effect, a legal time capsule, one that traps a nation in the moment of its weakest negotiation. And this is the twist: for all the public emphasis on technology, expertise, and capacity, the real struggle is not about machines. It is about lock-in. It is about signing away the right to correct a bad deal. It is about surrendering future sovereignty for the illusion of present convenience. If such a clause exists in the Kakamega arrangement, Kenya may already have lost more than it realizes. Because the danger is not that a foreign company will extract the gold. The danger is that Kenya will lose the right to redefine the terms, even when the gold begins to flow. Even when the profits become clear, even when the country understands the true value of what lies beneath its soil. This is not speculation. It is precedent. Across the continent, nations have discovered too late that the most devastating form of extraction is not physical, it is contractual. Mines were not lost by force. They were lost by signature. Governments did not lose sovereignty because they lacked courage, but because they underestimated the power of a single paragraph buried in a 100-page document. This is the part of the story no one announces on television. No minister reads this section aloud. No corporation advertises it in press releases. Yet it is the hinge on which entire economies swing. The greatest threat to Kenya's gold is not the foreign machine. It is the foreign clause. And when a nation's future is locked inside a contract it cannot change, sovereignty becomes ceremonial. Independence becomes rhetorical. And development becomes something that happens elsewhere while the nation watches its wealth leave in silence. The twist is simple, and devastating. The battle for Kakamega may already be underway, not in the mines, but in the margins. Kenya now stands before a door only it can open. Beneath Kakamega lies more than gold, it lies a decision that will define a century. A nation can lose a resource and recover. But a nation that loses the courage to claim what is its own loses something far deeper. Something no contract can restore. If Kenya chooses sovereignty, everything changes. The wealth stays. The skills grow. The future expands. Children inherit opportunity, not apology. But if Kenya chooses surrender, if it accepts the belief that others must always decide for it, then the gold may leave the soil. But the wound will remain. This moment belongs to Kenyans. Not to foreign companies. Not to distant shareholders. Not to those who profit from doubt. The next chapter must be written by those who live on the land. Not those who extract from it. If this message speaks to you, do not let it end here. Like the video. Leave your comment. Subscribe. Let your voice join thousands of others who believe Africa's wealth must serve Africa's people. Because history is watching. And the choice Kenya makes today will echo across a continent that has waited far too long to rise.